to be a successful product manager, you have to want to avoid blockers for engineering. Like, you are a problem solver. You're here to remove blockers from your development team so that we can get work done. And that means many different things. Research, it means decision making, it means problem solving, many different things. But at the end of the day, product managers unblock engineering teams, and we, build value for our customers, but we're also great problem solvers. So anything related to that, I think, is related to what a product manager does.
Perfect.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Product Unfiltered. Today we have AnnePaul, a principal product manager at Workday, a leading provider of enterprise cloud applications for finance and human resources. Anne brings a wealth of experience in building products and managing teams at companies such as Workday, Beacon, and Apple. She currently leads the development of people analytics, an AI-powered product that provide insights to HR teams, and demonstrates an exceptional ability to understand customer needs and translate them into valuable solutions. With a deep expertise in HR tech and data analytics, she will share her insights on the challenges and opportunities in the HR industry and how technology is shaping its future. Thank you so much, Anne, for taking out your time for this podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. And can you tell us more about your journey into product management? How did you get into PM? How did it started? And what ultimately led you to your current role at Workday?
Yeah, sure. So I think I have a pretty typical journey of getting into product management via another kind of discipline or field. A lot of the product managers that I work with today have come from a different role. I have experience in a different role and found product management through that. So I don't know if this is something you've heard in your other podcasts as well. So I joined a startup with 40 or so people in London called Peakon. And this was after my time at Apple. And Peakon is an employee engagement software company. And I actually started as a customer success manager. And so I was working directly with our customers to implement Peakon and work with customers on how best to use the system and how to engage their workforce. And as a customer success manager, you work very closely with the product. I became very familiar. I knew the ins and the outs of the product. And this also gave me a very unique perspective on how our customers were using our product. I was sometimes interacting with them and even helping them create workarounds. So customers would ask questions like, can Peakon do this? Or can I slice the data in this way? I want to be able to see, for example, my leavers engagement scores. And I would say, no, that's not available in the product. But, if you configure it this way, or you view the data in this way, you can get to your end result. And so, at that time, our product management function was just starting because we were a small company. And I was motivated to share that feedback with the engineers and the product manager that we had. And I realized that level of insight of how our customers were in reality using our product wasn't really well understood by the development teams. And so I think my desire and curiosity to help problems and help our customers enable, features that weren't possible in our product is what led me to product management. And I really love it here. I'm not looking to leave anytime soon. It's a very rewarding role. So I then internally transitioned into a product manager role, and I did that for multiple years at Peakon. And then in 2021, Workday acquired Peakon. And so I joined Workday through an acquisition of a startup. And then late in 2021, I moved into the people analytics product as a product manager there, and moving away from Peakon. So that was a little bit my journey from a different role, and found my way into product management.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And also, can you give us a brief overview about the people analytics tool and how is it helping HRs to make informed decisions?
Yeah, of course. So people analytics is a product that's powered by augmented analytics. It's an add-on SKU to Workday Core HCM. So that means that it can either be purchased while a customer is buying the core HR system or anytime afterwards as an add-on. So People Analytics has a a core algorithm or engine that we call the storyteller engine. And what it does is it searches through all of the millions of data points that our customers have through their use of Workday. So basically, we're searching through all of their people data. And what the algorithm does and what people analytics does basically is we look for trends and anomalies in the data. And we pull insights that HRBPs or HR leaders may have missed by their manual analysis of the data. We cover topics such as diversity and inclusion, talent organization, skills, attrition, and so on. And so we pull these anomalies or trends, and then we explain them with natural language text so that a non-data savvy person, sometimes HRBPs, are not used to working with data on a day-to-day basis. And so we help them understand the insight, what it's saying, and how it can impact their business. So maybe I can give one example just to bring it a little bit more concrete to life. So let's say a customer purchases people analytics. We sift through all of their Workday people data, and we detect insights. So for example, in the field of diversity and inclusion, we might say, oh, wow, did you know that you actually have low female representation in London compared to the rest of Europe? And more specifically, it's not just in London, it's actually the design team in London. So we're pulling out what the problem is, which is potentially female representation or lack of female representation, and specifically where. So an HRBP can directly act on that situation and try to improve the workforce. Another pretty example could be attrition. So if we're looking at where am I losing high performers, we might say, oh, wow, did you know you're losing a lot of your high performers in product management compared to product and technology? So all of this could be pulled manually, but by automating that process, it saves time for an HR business partner to be able to jump straight in and action the problem and hopefully improve their workforce.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And in fact, the way you mentioned how the complete workflow works, we are also interested to learn about what are some other challenges which organizations really face in analyzing people's data, and what are the usual outcomes you see organizations have been after using the people analytics tools. Like, what have been the improvements which the organizations have in terms of the overall efficacy and efficiency of the systems?
Sure. So I speak to many customers in my role. I speak to customers across different industries, different size of companies, and different locations as well. And I've identified multiple challenges but specifically those that tend to prevent HR organizations from becoming more data savvy. So some of them, the first one is, I think I mentioned a little bit before, but not all HR business partners or HR leaders can easily make sense of data. So the struggle to interpret and understand what data is actually saying is a challenge, but also the ability to trust the data, because, this is people data, which can sometimes be sensitive. So being able to trust what I'm seeing to then action, you want to be able to trust where it's coming from, but also understand what it's saying. Another challenge I think we can all relate to is knowing where to focus. Like, we have access to so much data today in all our lives that knowing where to start and what to focus on, especially in a huge organizations, can be tricky. So that's another challenge. Some of the customers that I work with are dependent on an HR IT team. So it's like data analysts that do all of this manual slicing and dicing analysis of the data. And all of that obviously is limited on someone's capacity. You can only generate as much insight and stories in the data as someone can actually take on. And so you can easily miss out on a lot of important information that person just doesn't have the capacity to pull or find. And so all of this takes a lot of time. We have customers that spend weeks every quarters pulling this data and going through it. And by the time they actually have the insight, they can kind of feel like they're playing catch up on something that's been present in the data for a while. And so this is something that people analytics helps by automating all of this process, by meeting HRBPs where they're at. So being able to deliver content to them in the way they're used to consuming content can really help them focus on the more strategic parts of their job and not just finding the insight.
Mhm. So, and when you're working with such huge data sets, which can also be sensitive at times, what all challenges do you face as a product manager while working on this tool?
Yeah. So in terms of like data privacy and all of that specifically, so yeah, it's the timely because of something we're working on. So I'll explain a little bit. So as you build a data product, you continuously have to ask yourself, who are my end users? Who are my end users today? And who will my end users be in the future? So for example, people analytics started where we started generating insights at the company-wide level, right? So company-wide data that could be very useful to a system admin or a data analyst. But as we want to expand the reach of our users, we might need to make some adjustments. So something that we're working on right now is adding additional layers of security. We want our product to be used by all of HRBPs, but something that we've heard and wasn't too surprised to hear, but from our customers is saying that company-wide data might not be relevant for all of our HRBPs. They might not have access to that type of data. So by building these additional layers of security that is configurable by a customer, you can restrict like the level of insight that you're presented to each user, but that also hopefully widens the base of customers. And so you're kind of giving less, but to more customers. And this is how you can avoid kind of data issues of seeing data that someone doesn't need to be able to see within their role. Kind of another example that I'm currently working on is how do you give insights for data that's confidential in nature? So for example, you can think of engagement data from my past at Peakon. That is confidential by nature. If employees know that everyone can see who gave feedback and my name is tied to everything, obviously employees will stop giving that type of feedback, and you need that feedback to improve a workplace. And so finding that balance between what is actionable feedback, what information do I need to deliver content that someone can actually do something with it, but with keeping away that sensitive information. And it's always a constant balancing act, and something that we're just like improving over time.
Yeah. And the people analytics product has a component of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we would also love to get a brief overview about this AI ML algorithm which drives the people analytics product. Can you share some insights over that?
Sure. So it's a multi-step process, and I won't go into too much detail on everything, but just like a high level. So I mentioned earlier, we call it our storyteller engine. That's like the name that we give internally to this algorithm, this ML AI machine learning kind of tool that we have, or algorithm. So it looks for stories. So like I said, we have access to these millions of data points in a customer tenant. And what this algorithm is looking for is stories. So think of those like female representation or attrition stories, those examples I gave earlier. So the first thing the storyteller does is it analyzes those millions of data points from the use of a customer's tenant, right? So all the data, all their people data within Workday. And here it's looking for patterns. And when I say patterns, we're looking at pockets of the organization or sub teams or subpopulations and how they are deviating from a norm. And a norm can be like how this group has been trending over time historically, or it could be how this population is deviating from an average, for example, at the organization level, the company level. So once we've detected our patterns, we then use something called graph processing that finds connections between the data points, and we rank the most significant stories because we want there to be an element of like connection between the stories that we populate. So now let's say we have our patterns, we have that connection point. We then use machine learning to reduce the noise and improve the signal. So this is basically prioritizing what we show to an end user. And so because we have all of this information in Workday, it's a system of record, we know who the user is and we know what organization they support. So we can more easily kind of prioritize which stories we want to showcase to which users. And then once we know the stories, we prioritize them. The last thing is to add that easy to consume text narrative so that non-data savvy people can still like understand what this is saying and why it's important. So there's like multiple layers that's all happening like in the back end.
Mhm.
Yeah. And thank you so much for that structured and crisp explanation of how the overall algorithm works. And I'm actually really interested to learn about the product management side of your role. As you mentioned about the extensive AI ML algorithm which is going in the back end, and we can clearly see how well you have understood the overall algorithm. So as a product manager who is working on such an kind of AI ML product, how important it is to learn about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how did you went through learning the concepts of AI, ML, and training any data set?
Yeah. I think as a product manager, there's obviously different types of product manager roles, but typically a product manager needs to be able to understand these concepts. And most importantly, be able to understand them, but also be able to explain them to customers or other stakeholders that you work with. But the beauty is that you also don't need to understand everything in detail. And this is why you work so closely with engineering teams. So I think like when I first joined people analytics, I came from Peakon, which was, doing similar algorithms, but for just different nature, different types of data. And so there was like a learning curve and working closely with engineers and also looking at real data and understanding what is coming out, because it's easy to kind of understand at the high level, conceptual level, but really seeing examples and being able to feeling confident to talk about it is like playing with the data itself. But I would say like really partnering with engineers that are the ones coding all of this. And as a product manager, you're always kind of putting on your user hat and explaining concepts from a user perspective of how I would want to interact with this technology and what I expect from it, rather than needing to know all the details of how things are implemented under the hood. And this is where you partner with like tech leads and engineering managers to really make that possible. So it's like a close collaboration with them, but really focusing on what will a user get out of this and what is the problem I'm trying to solve. That also always helps to not go in too much detail, I think, and keeping it at the level of what your users are going to experience with the technology.
Yeah. So, and also we see that in B2B space, there are a lot of stakeholders who are involved in the process, and your customers might not be your users and your users might not be your customers.
Yeah.
So in such a situation, how do you define a success of a product?
Yeah. So I think there's two kind of ways I would define the success of a product, and I'll get to the B2B aspect because I'm glad you asked. The first part is more like the business success, right? And so I work closely with our business to measure the commercial success of our product. And so I have regular cross-functional meetings with sales, customer enablement, marketing, strategy teams. And we look at how is people analytics performing as a revenue generating product. So we look at sales numbers, sales pipeline, how can product at all influence that? Sometimes there's things that we can do to support. We look at deployment. So it's not just did a customer purchase, but did they deploy and have they rolled it out to their end users? And then renewals, of course, like is there a customer that no longer wants to pay for this product, and what can product do to improve that? But from a product perspective, the things that I look at the most is product adoption, and specifically how are new features impacting adoption. And we measure adoption by looking at monthly active users, monthly active tenants, sessions, the length of sessions, and then feature interactions, like how are users using our new features. And we monitor that very closely, especially that it is a B2B product. And that when we look at not just a deployment, has it then been rolled out internally? Because we are one step removed from our end users that we actually care about. Yeah. And so you could have a customer that deployed people analytics, is getting real value from it, but they haven't rolled it out to their HRBPs. But for us, success is stickiness. And how can we make sure that our HRBPs are adopting people analytics and integrating in their day-to-day function and their day-to-day routine, because that is true success. It's not necessarily sales. It's not necessarily deployments. It's our active users, and those people that we're building the product for, are they using it? Are they coming back into it? And is it sticky for them?
Yeah. And for a B2B product like Workday, what is different channels which you guys use for taking feedback from customers? And from this feedback, how do you ultimately prioritize features? I'm really curious to understand that.
Yeah, so we get feedback in many different forms. So I don't know if you've invited an outbound product manager on your podcast before, but that could be an interesting role of another type of PM to interview. So we work very closely with outbound PMs. These are product managers that work directly with customers. So they are a lot on customer calls. They support sales, or more external facing. They don't directly work with engineering and building products, but they're more like collecting feedback. So that's definitely one way I work with an outbound product manager. We get feedback from sales, enablement. We get feedbacks directly from customers. And what we do is, obviously we have, like anyone else, a larger backlog than anything we could actually always deliver. So when we're looking at prioritizing all of these ideas, and product ideas don't only come from customers, they come from data science, they come from sales, they come from anywhere in the business. We go through a prioritization exercise. So we have all of our epics or ideas of projects, and we go through a prioritization exercise. So we look at things like, first, customer retention. Will this new feature improve customer satisfaction? For example, maybe it's an issue. Maybe it's a request that's been always requested, like a top request. And will it help us achieve our monthly active users goal? That's the top thing. We then look at sellability. Will this new feature help us sell people analytics more? Will it help us expand into new markets? And then scalability. Will this new feature help us scale or improve our efficiencies? And so we compare all of these feature ideas or customer feedback alongside each other based on that criteria. And that's how we prioritize our work for the next few months. It's an iterative process, and we work with many different stakeholders. And so, I think the important thing to remember is, like, the decisions you make today and that you prioritize today will actually only be used by customers in a few months, right? We're talking probably 6 months or 6 to 9 months. Probably in startups, maybe we're talking about 3 months, but it's like months later. So we need to make sure that we're solving the correct problems and continuing to iterate on that, and not get stuck on decisions that we made 6 months ago. Maybe things have changed as we go.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anne, for answering those questions. We'll be now moving to the next segment of the podcast, that is product paradox. So in this segment, we'll ask you a question, which will be a this or that question. There might not be a right answer to it, but we just want to understand your approach to that particular situation. So my first question to you, Anne, is, would you rather launch a product that is perfect and late, or you will launch a product that is good, but it is launched on time?
I'd be curious to see what everyone else answered on these. I'll go with what I think. So definitely on this one, I would say product that is good but launched on time. And the reason for that is that's the beauty of incremental development, right? We learn from our users, we take on their feedback, we iterate, we relaunch. And if you wait for anything to be perfect, you're not only losing money, but that definition of perfection might change over time. If you spend a year working on something, the original problem might have shifted. And so good, but on time.
Okay. And the next question, Anne, is, would you rather have a product with a high customer retention rate or a product with a high customer acquisition rate?
Definitely customer retention rate. I think you want stickiness. If you easily acquire customers, but then they don't adopt your product, then it's just a temporary success.
Yeah.
Our next question to you, Anne, is, should a product focus on solving one problem exceptionally well, or should solve multiple problems adequately?
Definitely one problem exceptionally well. Focusing on too many things can create actually a bad product. And that's when we call them Frankenstein products, when they try to do a little bit of everything, but they don't actually get anything really right.
Okay. And finally, the last question, Anne, is, do you believe that user feedback should always be implemented into a product? even if it contradicts with the product team's vision?
I would say definitely not. As PMs, we say more often than we say yes to customer feedback. And we can't just blindly build what customers want us to build. We have to stay very true to our product vision, because that's only how you get targeted and very useful products.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Anne, for answering all those questions. So now we have clearly understood about the people analytics tool, how the past of the tool has been and how the present is working. But we would also love to know the future of the tool. So since we are seeing that the future of HR technology is going to be disruptive with the new technologies coming in, how do you see people analytics tools evolving over time to stay ahead of the curve?
So definitely, I think in the future, we'll see a lot more like HR tech, or maybe all HR tech, incorporating new categories of AI. So things like generative AI or large data language models.
Mhm.
I think it will also become table stakes, like for any business and any HR tech. The volume of data is just increasing.
Mhm.
All the insights that are needed will require using these new types of data models. Also, I would say transparency in the data and wider access of the data. We see today that the demand for data is getting higher and higher, and so sharing data across stakeholders is increasing. So I definitely see something like that. I would even predict something of, data being able to be integrated, if we think of HR tech specifically, into all of the user flow that HR tech and HR professionals are using, from like hiring to performance management to solving diversity inclusion issues and questions. I think there'll be a future of like using AI across more stakeholders and like blending all of that more together. That's what I foresee. Let's see if I'm right.
So thank you so much, Anne, for sharing all those great insights. As we move towards the end of the podcast, our last question to you is, what advice would you give to aspiring product managers or product managers who are very early in their career to have a career trajectory where they can see a lot of success?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, product management is very exciting. I'm sure you both know that. It's a fast-paced field, and I really encourage everyone that's interested in this to pursue it. I get a lot of satisfaction from this role. I would say like one advice is to keep exploring other adjacent roles as well. There's so many different roles that work alongside a product manager. You have UX researcher, you have product design, QA. There's so many opportunities in product management, but also other adjacent fields. I would say if there's anything that's you're interested in, to go and explore that. Product management requires so many skills in different areas. And so wherever you start, know that there's many roles that lead into product management. Like I shared in the beginning with my journey, it's not a traditional role with like a linear career path. So I would get into it, start experiencing a different role, and know that a lot of roads lead to product management.
So this brings us to the end of today's podcast. Hope you all enjoyed today's episode and our discussion has helped learn something new. Stay tuned for more such exciting episodes. Thank you so much for tuning into Product Unfiltered.
Thank you.